Thank you for being here, organizing things, Mr. Casper.
I appreciate it.
Yes, so you're in the front row, get that knowledge, get that information.
That's because I can't see.
Oh, yeah. No problem about that. But here we're at ABSI. It's a great opportunity to be back present. As you know, we've had the pandemic and nobody's had an opportunity to kind of communicate, be together. So I take this as a privilege to be able to speak before you and also to talk about a very challenging topic that has been in our community for years. The topic of melanin. I titled this topic here, Melanin Revisited, because of a book named Egypt Revisited, edited by Ivan Van Sertima. You ever get a chance to look at that? It has multiple types of articles, multiple authors, readdressing what we think of this place called Egypt or Kemet. So I'm using the same context to talk about melanin revisited, because really what is melanin when we talk about it? So my presentation goals, that's why I wanted to make sure I got a chance to start on time. I'm a little 10 minutes behind, but you're with me, right?
Yeah.
Introduce some historical discussions on ancient wisdom and how we can merge it with current concepts. Also revisit the presence of melanin in the skin, the brain, internal organs, and link it to this new concept I'm calling KABAFA, rather than saying just melanin. Briefly discuss epigenetic factors connecting the body and environment, because essentially things are happening in our world and our bodies are channeling that energy in, and that's why some people probably get more sick than others. And then conclude with energy as a major discussion here for a psychology event. I want to talk about trauma and how energy can be reallocated or should be reallocated, and also deal with the issue of channeling it for positive energy. Energy is everywhere. So now we start talking about science. That's where we're going to talk about how melanin is involved in science. So for soul and rhythm, there's got to be something combining that and defining that. So the Ka relates to the first division of the soul. So you got 7 divisions of the soul our ancient African ancestors talked about. I'm just taking the first 2 because Ka deals with the body. It's like a physical representation of 2 hands up, like the surrender sign. It's the Ka. I talked about it in the Dark Matters, Dark Secrets. In your skin, the cells, there's a melanocyte that has hands raised, like Almighty Ra baby, the sun baby. So you got the Ka, like actually in your skin. You got the Ka represented in terms of the ancient terminology. And the second one, Ba, is represented by a human-headed bird. Dealing with the breath. And we have yoga specialists here at the conference that deal with breath. So important. So the Ba in the body, without breathing, there is no life. So if you go to a funeral or you're seeing a body that's just left, it's no longer here anymore, but the breath, once that breath goes, then the person's not longer here, but the soul is still present. So the Ka and the Ba is the first part of this terminology, and then the Fa relates to something that I read in Stolen Legacy by George G. and James. Happened to read it, had the book for several years, but started to read it. It's something called fire atoms. Fa represents Fa, fire atoms, as described by ancient scientists and chemists. So I put the word KABAFA related to something that's dealing with this concept of melanin and its spiritual and soul essence. So KABAFA, this is just a term to redefine melanin and what our ancient African ancestors conceptualized about the topic. The power of pigmentation is the essence of life in all elements. If you don't have pigmentation, really you're not living. Plants, they can't exist without pigmentation. That pigmentation is chlorophyll. It's where you see pigmentation is life. If you've ever seen or heard about nuclear power plants and reactors, and they explode and they no longer can be around. You can't be around because of radiation. But guess what? Mold develops, fungus develops, black develops. So it can survive in all kinds of environments. We also know about it in the universe, dark matter, dark energy that's out there. Well, what is this darkness? It's something that's absorbing energy. That's all our bodies do, absorb energy. So we're dealing with the flow of energy that you can see and some that you cannot see. So another way of expressing this, that KABAFA is actually a way of waking the grand omnipotent design in you. You with me? The
Yes.
grand omnipotent design is in you. We've been told for so many years about so-called inferiority, how we are not human, how we are animal-like, but guess what? That's not the case. So we start to define it in a way to explain ourselves. There's a grand omnipotent design in you, and that's what people talk about the God in you. So KABAFA, in my opinion, should be our psychological understanding of melanin. So check this out. Everyone had it and displayed it until they were discovered. Swallow that for a little bit. Everyone had it and displayed it until they were discovered. Anyone want to tell me what I mean by that? Well, see where I'm going with that? See, everywhere we've gone, or they've gone, that is the melanin recessive people, they've gone out discovering people. Discovering and figuring out people. So they're looking at people, but when they discovered us, they messed up how people were originally living. So as we were living with energy, living in nature, living in the universe, you got someone coming in who's totally opposite of that. So we all had that before we were discovered. Now they kind of altered how we think about the world and how it should operate. The native peoples of the lands, of any land, when they saw this European or this foreigner or this melanin recessive person coming in, there was certainly a halt about what's going on, but most people in nature are loving people, so they're going to be accepting. Those people coming in weren't thinking like that, so when they were discovered, this whole issue of how we look at energy and living for the world and life was altered. So I've tried to talk about this for years. I wrote The Science of Melanin in '95 to talk about how we can describe melanin beyond just saying skin pigmentation. Now it's also in our brain, many parts of our body. I wrote Dark Matter's Dark Secrets to go a little bit further into the pineal gland, drug addiction, and other elements because it became a more significant topic. And then I wrote Pigment Power right before the pandemic, or as the pandemic hit. We talked about topics in melanin to take it to a higher level about science. I mean, people are studying this. We're not studying it like we should. People are making billion-dollar research projects on melanin. We're not doing that. So, in terms of ancient investigations, Gerald Massey, Ancient Egypt, Light of the World, you know, he's been one of the forethought thinkers about how we're looking and going back to revisit how we look at Kemet. George G.M. James wrote The Stone Legacy. I'm going to again show that little passage about how we talk about fire atoms and make me sit back. Our ancient African ancestors were talking about this melanin way back then, just didn't call melanin. Why? Because the Greeks weren't in a place to tell us what to think. So they were conceptualizing these things way in the past. Brother Akbar, I think he's, is he somewhere in the audience here? Brother Naim Akbar has written Light of Africa. I mean, he's written Visions. I mean, without his conceptualizations, along with Brother Wade Nobles. He's not here, but his queen is here. Sister Vera is here. People who have been at the forefront of creating, conceptualizing. It didn't come because white people said what we should do. No, this is the antithesis to what they've tried to do against us. So these authors, specifically speaking of Akbar and Nobles being the psychologists, they've helped to redefine how we look at many concepts dealing with psychology. So much respect to you for doing that. Wayne Chandler, with a book called Ancient Future. Consider him a master photojournalist. If you ever look at his work, he's looking at all over the world the images of African people who've been in there in Thailand, in Malaysia, in Europe. I mean, so he's going in to look at where we've been, actually before we were discovered, because we were already there. So I just consider his book Ancient Future. Check out that name. He's talking about the teachings of, I'll show his book, but he's talking about these ancient thoughts, 7 principles of life, and the first one was the all, or the mind, and that's where we're going when we talk about energy. I'll talk about that a little later. So with Akbar's book, Light from Ancient Africa, he conceptualizes the soul in there and breaks down the 7 divisions, so it's not just the 2. I'm saying how deep this is because we may say, hey, what's up, soul brother? What's up, soul sister? But all we are saying is soul. They had divisions of the soul. They looked at it more complex. So for us to now just say soul, we haven't even gotten into soul studies yet. Remember in high school, we did the social studies? Now we need to have soul studies now to now break this down, what it really is. So I appreciate Brother Akbar for presenting that book. And then Brother Nobles, I mean, seeking the Saku. He said we should be Saku Shetis, not just psychologists. I mean, psychologists is also a Greek word, psyche meaning mind. I mean, we can start redefining how we're looking at things because this psychology is not working. Many of our people are struggling. People are disconnected. We've come out the pandemic, people can't look at one another anymore. People can't communicate anymore. So that has heightened the problem. But we need to look at ways, and Brother Nobles has also been at the forefront to redefine our conceptions of psychology. And then Brother Wade Chandler's book, Ancient Future, The Teachings of Prophetic Wisdom of the Seven Hermetic Laws. Again, 7 of them, but the first one's dealing with the all and the mind, and that's the first. Think about creation. Nothing can be created without thoughts from your mind first. So that's where we're talking about going back to nature. When people are meditating, they're trying to get to that state of consciousness where everything is one, that divineness. So what I'm presenting is nothing new. It's just a matter of now reconceptualizing it to fit where we are today. So that picture in the middle there is Sigmund Freud's office. On the left there is office with the motifs of African images. Imhotep, Osiris, Isis. It's like this man who created this thing called psychoanalysis. Oh, he just came with that on his own. His students, Jung and Adler Jung, studied the collective unconsciousness. Just came with that on his own. Nah, they studied it from African people, black people, KABAFA people, people who had an essence and a correlation with the cosmos. And I like this picture because at the top of one of his pictures above where the couch is Abu Simbel, straight out of Africa. So when I got a chance to visit, and you start to understand that, I don't even know if Sigmund Freud even went to Africa. I know Jung did because he was studying African people, trying to take this stuff and talk about spirit. But they have it all within their orientation, but it's not part of their reality. So to go to Kemet, actually see the monuments, it gives you a whole different perspective on how we're looking at the world. So historically, when we speak about how we're leading to this discussion, beyond and Gerald Massey, Count Volney, with a book called Ruins of Empires, went there, saw the monuments. It's like, my goodness, these people that we are talking about as bad are the ones that created all this. You don't hear nothing about no Count Volney today. You don't hear anything about his work. So Count Volney was traveling during the same times as Napoleon, and also living during the same times as somebody called Thomas Jefferson. You ever heard of him? President of the United States, huh? Has this place in Virginia called Monticello. Guess what? Volney visited him. I knew that by reading the book by Kenji X called Stamp from the Beginning. It talks about how when Volney came here and he was visiting and sharing information about the world and the cosmos, and you know darn well Thomas Jefferson knew you weren't no inferior person. If you got this guy showing him the images and telling him what's going on, but you know Thomas Jefferson spent time in France and messing around with the African slaves like Sally Hemings, and but still kept slaves, huh? It's a mentality. But others outside of this white American concept understood the importance of African contributions. So with Napoleon, religion is necessary. Without it, the poor would kill the rich. So our minds have been manipulated by forcing things on us that are away from how we really should be conceptualizing life. So think about when Count Volney was there, he saw the images, he was drawing what it looked like, and again, back for that time period, the whole model of the Sphinx was not actually uncovered. Over years, they started taking the sand away, but they saw that big black image there, that big black nose. Even with the drawing there, you see this term called prognathism, about the African cheeks and the jawbones extending out. So the image there doesn't really look like that, but you look at the real image on the monument, you know it's an African. So when you see it, there's no question. When you go, you can still see the color on the headdress of the, or Horum Akhet. We shouldn't call it the Sphinx, it's the Greek stuff again. But if you start defining things from our own perspective, you start to see different terms. But to see the color still on the headdress, you just see the magnificence of how did they even create something that big and do that. And some of that was done primarily before the pyramids were there in that complex. So if we study geopolitics, we start to understand why these concepts are very difficult to conceptualize, how it's been used against us, making us feel like we're inferior because we talk about blackness. So for Napoleon, he says, my decision to destroy the authority of the blacks in Haiti is based on the need to block forever the march of blacks in the world. That's Haiti back in the 1800s. So it's like, okay, where we at today, 2023? They still trying to stop your march. It's not even dominating the world, to just be. What is it about you that makes you want to continually fight someone to ensure that they won't have access to growth and development? There's got to be a mindset that creates that. When we say the mindset, there's a Native American writer named Jack Forbes wrote a book called Columbus and Other Cannibals. I'll show his book next, but he talked about this Wetiko disease. Wetiko disease. Ever heard of it? No. Wetiko disease. A contagious psycho-spiritual disease. Do we even talk about spirits being diseased? We talk about, because we know people have psychosis, but soul and spirit cannot really be diseased. It is like an autoimmune disease of the psyche. You say autoimmune, meaning when your body starts fighting against itself. Multiple sclerosis could be an autoimmune disease. Lupus could be an autoimmune disease. For some reason, the body's fighting against itself, destroying certain cells. So spiritually, something's fighting to not allow the spirit to grow and be righteous. It is an Algonquin word, so a Native American term, for a cannibalistic spirit that is driven by greed, excess, and selfish consumption. We still experience that today. Every time you see it, you can have a discussion right now by any part of the United States, and all this gentrification going on, all the buildings going up, tearing down the trees, no place to play. Who creates a mindset like that where growth and development is about continually just taking and grabbing and plunging? What kind of spirit is that? So it deludes its host into believing that cannibalizing the life force of others is a logical and morally upright way to live. I don't know what's happening in Florida. They got some problems in Florida. You got a government trying to change up everything.
Algonquin.
Algonquin. So that's the Native American term. And so the brother, the scholar who wrote it, or popularized that, is Jack Forbes. Wrote a book called Columbus and Other Cannibals. And if you actually investigate the term, as a white guy that's now, I guess, using his term, he's written books on it. But again, they kind of take our stuff and flip it for them to try to not make money off of it, but a career off of that. But again, the native peoples of the land have always looked at the land with peace and harmony. They're no different than African people looking at the land in peace and harmony. So, phasing on in terms of why I'm now conceptualizing this, because I wrote this book in 2005 with Brother Bruce Bynum, Dr. King, Sister Ann Brown. I mean, we put it together and had it published by African American Images out of Chicago with Juancho Jufa. Since then, may his soul rest in peace, Richard King has passed. So I wrote an obituary and added the obituary to our new edition, and also added a new chapter. So in the new chapter, talking about fire atoms ignite inner vision. So when this fire atoms I'm talking about is what I saw and read in George James' book, Stone Legacy, which we've all hopefully read, but maybe overlooked. He's talking about ancient philosophers like Democritus, who talked about these terms about nous in the mind. And what I'm trying to say is that, you know darn well they weren't the first people to conceptualize that. They came to Africa and studied. They came to Africa and studied, and they got what they got from those ancient scientists that were there. So really, whatever conceptualizations are coming from this may be misconstrued in the first place, because they didn't understand. Fire atoms are the carbon-based molecule we call melanin. Man. So when you read Stone Legacy, you see fire atoms. What is fire atoms? I'm saying it's melanin. Why? Because melanin is the pigment that gives the life color. It is like the chlorophyll in plants. Without this pigmentation, life would cease to exist. So when you read, it's interesting because in my chapter 5 of the book, and then chapter 5 of Stone Legacy is where this actually comes from. Pre-Socratic philosophers and the teachings ascribed to them. The atom in sensation and knowledge. And this is pretty deep because we say sensation and knowledge. In Dr. Akbar's article with Noble's Introduction to African Psychology back in the 1970s, okay, they talked about melanin and asking the question, well, what is it? What is this mystery of melanin? And they talked about in the article about what is black intelligence. If there's something black intelligence, called consciousness and sensitivity. That's what black intelligence is. Intelligence itself is a reified term, meaning that It's something created and manipulated anyway. But when you say for African people culturally, consciousness and sensitivity become important to what you know. And that's why we're sensitive people we always get taken advantage of. We're so sensitive. We're conscious of things, but we sometimes get it manipulated. But that's important for us. So the atom in sensation of knowledge. Now, the atom is something that, wow, they were able to go back then and talk about something that minute. The mind or soul is composed of fire atoms, which are the finest, the smoothest, and the most mobile. Now, this is written by James in 54, but he's conceptualizing what those Greek philosophers were talking about back there around 400 BC, but you know that all came before 400 BC. These fire atoms are distributed throughout the whole universe and in all animate things, and especially in the human body, where they are found in the largest numbers. What else is going to be? You heard of dark matter? That's in the universe. You heard of melanin pigmentation? You heard of something in your brain called neuromelanin? What else could it be? So that's what I'm saying. This fire atoms becomes, in my opinion, a strong foundation to kind of look at how we can reconceptualize this topic of melanin rather than just saying melanin, which is multiple things. So nous, or mind or soul, becomes key. And so as we as Psychologists, as we start to now push the importance of studying the soul and spirit, we're now getting more down to the essence of people in their lives rather than, here, take this pill, come back and tell me how it makes you feel. That's not, this medical, pharmaceutical, industrial complex has probably created most of the problems that we're dealing with today. So, and then fire atoms again. In your mind, fire atoms equals melanin, okay? So, in the brain, you have these carbon-based molecules that are all functioning and they all impact melanin. Or melanin can impact it. Or you talk about the issue of life principles. So, dopamine, norepinephrine, those two are your catecholamines, catechonucleus. Talking about the issue of benzene rings, talking about the issue of carbon. Again, talking about this thing that deals with melanin. So without those neurotransmitters, your brain's not working right. And this is the part where you gotta have psychology. Guess what? You can't run from the science. You know, students don't want to take biological psychology, don't want to take physiological psychology, because they don't want to see these terms. Break down the terms and make it real to understand, oh, this is important for how your body works. Maybe they'll understand and appreciate better. Norepinephrine, again, for excitement. Dopamine, again, euphoria, makes you feel good, also deals with movement. Acetylcholine, also for movement. People with Alzheimer's disease, they say there's a less amount of acetylcholine in certain brain parts. So acetylcholine helps out with stimulation. It's interesting that people who smoke cigarettes get that kind of little stimulation from the nicotine, which is what's stimulating acetylcholine receptors. Gamma aminobutyric acid and glutamate and phenylalanine and tyrosine, all those collectively are called amino acids. Guess what? You need amino acids for your body to work. No amino acids, no proteins, guess what? Your body's not going to work right. So gamma aminobutyric acid, or GABA, is the inhibitory one. It slows your body down. People may take drugs for anxiety, anxiousness, benzodiazepines, they function to make that GABA work better to slow your body down so you're not stressed out. Glutamate, excitatory. It can cause a problem. Too much excitation. So you could have glutamate excitotoxicity, destroying brain cells, but again, glutamate is stimulatory. You probably heard of MSG, monosodium glutamate. That's like a stimulatory compound that is really just used as a flavor enhancer. That's all it is. Also, you keep eating chips, you keep eating chips. You can't stop eating chips because that flavor enhancer is doing that to you, so it's actually stimulating the brain. Phenylalanine, tyrosine. Phenylalanine is before tyrosine to make your neurotransmitters. Tyrosine before your neurotransmitters, so it becomes the base molecule. Without it, you don't have your brain neurotransmitters. These last two, melatonin and serotonin, they are involved in the pineal gland working right. So the pineal gland, we'll show a little later on, becomes that organ that is associated with spiritual enlightenment. And it's functioning when you're asleep. And it's sure when you sleep, you're dreaming. So we're talking about dream states. So all these carbon-based molecules are in your body. Guess what? You also have external agents that are similar. They have similar effects. DMT, dimethyltryptamine. If you ever read a book called Spirit Molecule by Richard Strassman. It talks about how these chemicals, like beta carbon, these chemicals are actually externally can be taken, but they excite what's in your brain to give you a higher state of consciousness. Marijuana, don't know anything about it. Kids know about it. You ask them to spell something like gamma-butyric acid, they can't spell that. Actually spell marijuana, they all know how to spell marijuana. So marijuana has some kind of, like say, hallucinogenic properties, makes your mind expand. Cocaine, similar to how dopamine works, stimulates dopamine, and so it causes excitement. Phenylcyclidine, you ever heard of PCP? Angel dust, it's a problem, but these external things that are exciting the body. Opium chills you out, makes you feel a little bit reserved. Some people taking heroin, or it's opium, heroin. Sometimes they get problems with pain, so morphine. So all those are very important chemicals externally. Amphetamine, excitation, alcohol, depressants, slow you down. LSD, believe it or not, LSD stands for lysergic acid diethylamide. Looks just like serotonin, chemically that is. So LSD can make you go on trips like you can fly, jump out of buildings. Guess what? Serotonin doesn't make you do that, but it alters your consciousness. Lower levels of serotonin for people who don't have it makes them feel depressed. That's why some of the medicines used for depression have been antidepressants that boost serotonin levels. But people say it doesn't really work because it can take 6 weeks for that to work in something. So is it the serotonin or is it a placebo effect? Or is it receptors? So the point is that the medical pharmaceutical industrial complex becomes a game because you're now trying to see what may work, and the same chemicals for one person or one ethnic group may not work for another. And the last one, MDMA, methylene dimethylamphetamine, ecstasy. Do you know they're using that for psychology studies now? PTSD? So you now got these external agents that have been looked at as really bad drugs. Now they're using them for certain types of psychological treatments. So that's the neurochemistry. Now this is the neuroanatomy, how we relate to where melanin's functioning. Substantia nigra, deep in the brain, midbrain. If it doesn't work right, you got some problems with your movements. But the name itself, substantia, substance, nigra, black substance. If it's absent, problems. It's not like that area is getting any sunlight, so it's there serving as a reason to be dark in that brain. Red nucleus, 2 little bumps or little circles. I'll show you the image. But red nucleus, these are like something called mirror neurons. Mirror, right? A mirror. So you see a baby, and you may do something, the baby does something too. You smile, the baby smiles. So the child is, or the other person is seeing what you're doing. And so in your brain, those cells are lighting up. So we're talking about consciousness. If I ask you, can you moonwalk? I say, no, but what's the first thing that comes in your mind? Moonwalking. You know what I mean? So these cells are lighting up in your brain and they're pigmented. That's what I call the red nucleus. Locus ceruleus. Locus ceruleus is for that norepinephrine. It's going to your brain for excitement. Nucleus accumbens. That's the area that's like in the forebrain. For people who have drug addiction problems, these areas are lit up a lot, and they keep on getting reinforced, and that's why people get caught up in drug addiction. Places like the nucleus accumbens and ventral tegmental, those 2 areas working together, that's the reinforcing area. And so a carbon-based molecule like dopamine and something like cocaine stimulating that makes a person feel good. But all those areas are melanin. That's the point I'm trying to make to you. And then the tectum, that's kind of like the top part of the midbrain, 2 little bumps. It's right before the pineal gland. I'll show you the area. Hippocampus, you should remember that because that deals with memory. You gotta remember stuff. Hippocampus, memory, and amygdala for emotions. All deep in the brain. I'll show you those structures. And then again, in terms of pathways and other areas, pineal gland, deep there in the brain. Center, actually, it's the only one that's not bilaterally symmetrical. It's only one. It's got to be serving a significant purpose. There's only one in there. Habenula, it's like a little bump right before the pineal gland. And the interpeduncular nucleus, that's way down in the hypothalamus. Guess what? There are certain brain areas that have not been determined what they do yet. Just like there's certain parts of the world in cave systems people haven't been to yet. There's certain parts of the ocean people haven't found or investigated yet. So just like the Earth has been in that scenario, the The brain is the same way. So there's a pathway from the interpeduncular nucleus down to the hypothalamus by way of this area right here. I don't want to confuse you with that, but I'm just saying this area, they don't know why and how it functions, but it's from the pineal gland way down to the hypothalamus. It's connecting things. You start to think about when you connect your brain to a higher state of consciousness, guess what? You might be able to build pyramids again. Nigrostriatal pathway, movement, mesolimbic pathway, emotions. Both of them are highly dopamine dependent. Without dopamine, that doesn't work. So, when we talk about the advantages of having that darkness inside your body, it's an antioxidant. It prevents your cells from deteriorating. Nerve conduction facilitator. It makes things run faster, quicker. It's like when you got to rub your hands together, creating heat. But melanin itself, as an absorber of energy, makes energy go faster. And then energy transformer. Everywhere you see it in your body, from the skin, absorbing the sun. I got in the article in the chapter in the pigment power, sun conscious. You know you feel much better on a sunny day. Sun conscious. Beyond the skin, the ear. Inner ear melanin. You know you hear a different vibe when you hear music. The melanin receptive person, I don't know what they dance to when they hear music. They're dancing to the words. But for us, it's a certain rhythm that you're hearing. Vision. You can't see without having melanin on the back of your eyeball. You're basically blind without it. So it's there to serve as an energy transformer. So, quickly, through the brain, here's the pineal gland right there in the center. That blue area. Right? When I told you the habenula's right there. These two little bumps, that's the superior and inferior colliculus. They help you deal with keeping things in orientation. Like if I had you close your eyes and I threw something in the room and it dropped, your orientation would tell where it dropped at. If you're watching a bird fly in the sky, it helps you keep things in orientation. So beyond vision and hearing, just seeing and hearing, there's multiple aspects of seeing, multiple aspects of hearing. So your brain processes all that. That's why we start talking about going to a spiritual level. The brain has to process all that. So how do we now engage the brain? That's where we need to be. And so all those dark areas there are those melanated areas. When I mentioned the locus ceruleus, I mentioned the substantia nigra. If you go back and look at this again, those areas are where I'm saying the dark spots are. It's like brain stem. And that's not because of the sun. That's because of genetics. So all along the brain and inside the brain, chemicals flow. The chemicals that flow around your brain and inside your brain is called cerebrospinal fluid. The spinal fluid's flowing to what cause waste products to be transmitted, to also cause the chemicals to be transmitted. So if you got one chemical that needs to get to another part of the brain, guess that it can be gotten there by the flow of the cerebrospinal fluid. So we see those arrows, it's just talking about the flow. You could have a blockage somewhere in the flow and that could cause some brain problems, but most of the time that's not in older adults, it's when using younger children. So when somebody's getting a spinal tap and they're taking the spine and extracting that fluid from the lumbar region, they're actually taking the cerebrospinal fluid. So at nighttime, these chemicals can flow from that pineal gland, which is actually sitting in fluid. Is the pineal gland right there? It's actually sitting in the third ventricle, fourth ventricle area. So the chemicals are flowing out, and then I don't know if you dream all night long, but there's certain times of period at nighttime when right before you wake up, intense dream. So the chemicals are flowing throughout the brain, causing that to happen. Again, just look at another section. Try to give you a different visual. I showed you the words, but I want you to see the actual images. So the sagittal section of the brain is that pineal gland again there. I told you about the hypothalamus way down here. This is another section of the hypothalamus. From here up to here. From here all the way down to there. That connection, I believe, is very important for making the pineal gland connect to your hypothalamus, which is what kicks in your hormones. Without hormones, you don't have a lot of things happening in your life. So something's triggering that. And I think it's that direction from the habenula down to the interpeduncular nucleus. So I mentioned the amygdala area earlier. The amygdala is right there in front of the hippocampus. There's the hippocampus. There's the amygdala. both sides of your hemispheres. So without that memory connected to your emotions, guess what? You don't have really humanity. People who are mass killers or psychotic, guess what? They're not showing emotions. Some people have emotional problems, guess what? It could be a problem with that limbic system, which is connecting these organs together. So we say limbic system, it just means a border of cells collectively together working that impacts our emotions. So deep in the brain, if you ever heard of the thalamus is like an integration site. It's not melanated, it just becomes a site where you have a whole lot of information going through. It's like your MCI. It used to be what? You used to have MCI, now we got what? T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon. It's like that conjunction site right there, dead in the middle of the brain. And then you look in the middle, there's that locus coeruleus, those dots I showed you earlier. There's a substantia nigra, those dots I showed you earlier. If those are impacted and not working right, guess what? The chemicals are not going to be emitted. Guess what? Your thinking is impacted. Problem. And I want to show the cerebellum right there. Believe it or not, the cerebellum has more cells in it than your spinal cord and more cells than your cortex. It has like 70 billion cells. So the cerebellum can't be there just for a back arrangement. No, it's doing more in terms of helping out with fine coordinated movement and also learning. So with all those cells there in that cerebellum, it's got to be doing much more than just keeping you oriented in terms of your fine coordinated movement. So here's again a side section of the brain where we can now look at those dark areas, but the brain is pretty much gray. If you take a real brain out, yeah, it's a slab of fat in your head, but you cut it inside. Really, and don't take that personal if somebody calls you fathead. Because fat is what your brain's made of. They call you bonehead, all right. That relate the pineal gland not working right and it's calcified, but having a fat in your brain is important. So you take all these slices, the next image I'm going to show you are some of the slices going through there, but showing it to you directly. So where you see these cavities, like caves, that's an area where that cerebrospinal fluid was flowing. A cave right there, a cave right there. Here's an open area. So the fluid bathes inside and also around. And again, as these hormones are being emitted, you can see how they can go and be transferred via that chemical system somewhere else in the body, in the brain. So the dark areas, there's the red nucleus right there. You see the substantia nigra right below. So when you go start looking deeply in the brain to see where these areas are, and you stain them, you start to see their connections to other parts of the brain. So again, just cut it this way, but now we're looking at all the images front. And you start to see deep, this is like midbrain area. Those little circles, again, the red nucleus and the substantia nigra right below it. And I want to show you what happens when they don't work right. So, see all these fibers right here? These fibers are now going to other parts of the brain. Have you ever heard of the term basal ganglia? That means base cells in the base of the brain. So the basal ganglia usually relates to those cells that are helping you to modify your movement. Not control it, but to help regulate it. So a person who has a problem with the basal ganglia, they can't stop those tremors. Or they can't walk right. And so there's a disease that creates that, and we'll see that. The disease is called Parkinson's disease. But look at some things that could actually create and cause the problem. So as we channel and now talk about epigenetics, it's the study of stable changes in cell function that do not involve alterations in the DNA sequence, like CAG, whatever, adenine, guanine, whatever that sequence is, not changing that. It says epigenetics most often involve changes that affect the regulation of gene expression. And that persists through cell division. So you can actually start to change a person's cells over time, maybe through something like trauma. Or something external like chemicals that are in the environment. So the changes impacting cellular and physiological phenotypic traits may be due to external or environmental factors to be determined. And it's problematic because we got so much pollution around. Water in the air, all them chemtrails and things in the sky, so much pollution around, we don't know what's really causing your problems. So it creates a disease state that can also help, or epigenetics can also help maybe to enhance life. That's what we need to be for psychologists.
Right.
So neurodegeneration. So Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative disorder. So if you look at the top brain, that's an unhealthy brain. The darkness is not there. Look at a healthy brain, the darkness and the substantial nitrate is there. All those images I showed you, cutting it this way, look at the brain, a coronal section. Those areas are dark, but in a person with Parkinson's disease, they have tremors of rest, fascination, they shuffle in the walk, because the basal ganglia is not operating right for them to what? Function properly.
Mm.
So there's another disease called Huntington's chorea. That's pretty much a genetic disorder, a dominantly transmitted genetic disorder, but it still affects the what basal ganglia and what movement. They used to call it Huntington's chorea because chorea related to choreography and movement. So here we have again areas that are darkly colored. If they're not working right, movement problems. For us as African people, we need to start to look at things in our environment that are impacting this. And one could be bisphenol A. Have you ever seen water bottles and has on there BPA free?
Mm-hmm.
BPA free stands for bisphenol A free. It's not in there, in that bottle, because that's supposed to be a carcinogenic. Endocrine disruptors. You've seen this brother named Tyrone Hayes. He presented some work on, he used to work for AstraZeneca, studying chemicals, and they studied how it was impacting the frogs and the tadpoles and the fish, and fish growing more eyes than they should, and frogs more legs than they should.
Mm-hmm.
Those are endocrine disruptors coming from the chemicals that are then put in the water, and then we then start ingesting that. Polypropionated diphenol ethers, these are like used for flame retardants. So, but it's in our environment, it's going to create a problem in our physiology. And then organophosphates. You heard that brother who had, I guess, sued Monsanto for phosphate, and then so he won. But I mean, at this point, he got cancer, he's dying.
Right.
But the pesticides, they inactivate acetylcholinesterase. Acetylcholinesterase is the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine. Remember, that's the one for movement. So it's altering a person's state of their body's ability to operate and move. And the last one, paraquat and MPTP. Paraquat is an herbicide. Looks just like the chemical MPTP, which these kids in California were taking. You read some biological psychology text, talks about these kids in California taking designer drugs, 20 years old, developing Parkinson's disease, 20 years old.
What's the name of the drug?
MPTP, methylphenyl tetrahydropyridine, just MPTP. The metabolite of it was destroying the cells. So that's when people started thinking that, oh, maybe there's some neurotoxicity causing the problem where people are developing these tremors. Because not everybody who has tremors may not have Parkinson's disease, but it's affecting those brain areas that are melanated, because melanin what is an antioxidant, absorbing chemicals to protect you. But if it can no longer protect, it's going to start to destroy those cells. So for us, looking at if we had our original KABAFA, not worried about how others are manipulating the world environment, hip hop music, rap music, y'all know we created that, altered the world. It ain't like hip hop or rap came from Africans just here in America, because we was rapping back there on the continent. Rapping really everywhere we go, doing work, just using rhythm and words. We just take it to another level here in the United States and how it's impacting the rest of the world. But hip hop music and rap, that's us. Dance moves and rhythm, you know there's no other dancers and performers like us.
Yeah.
Who was the so-called hardest working man in business? James Brown, right? You got Michael Jackson, you got MC, you got all these performers that no one else is going to top and reach that level. And you got drumming and beats. You know we got all kinds of flavors in our movements. So drumming and beats. Question?
Which is it that we dance to? You know, the 1, 2, 3, 4. Which is it? Black.
What?
The beats is what it say?
Isn't it 2 and 4?
Do we hear the 2 and 4?
Yeah, we were talking about square
1 and
dancing.
3.
We were talking about square dancing, right?
You said it.
Why do you like square
right,
dancing?
that's square. That's square dance. Okay.
2-4, yeah.
2-4. So it's 2-4. Thank you. That's what
But I'm saying that, you know, with Europeans or melanin receptive people, they like the square dance.
Right.
Because just follow the numbers. That's easy. You ain't feeling the rhythm. But for us, you put a beat,
Yeah.
neck's going and arms going. What is going on internally in the body that makes that happen? It's that KABAFA. And the sports moves, basketball, you don't know.
Okay, stop.
Yes.
I don't have no rhythm, so what am I missing?
Yeah, you got
I
rhythm.
really don't. I really can't.
You just need
The
to
way
feel
you're
it.
doing, just like here. You got it.
I really don't. I mean, because when my kids are trying to teach me, and they was like, listen to the beat. I was like, which one? I hear a lot of beats. I can't catch the beats.
We'll work on you.
I just want to know what's missing.
We ain't gonna call you an anomaly either. We're gonna work on you. Because the reality is, there's still some KABAFA in terms of that experience. It's not like all black people can do all those things.
Right.
Y'all, anybody here can rap? You guys are rap. You know how hard it is to do some polysyllabic terminology, some massive beats. I got mad respect for somebody like Black Thought from Roots. I got mad respect for Most Def. How do you do that?
Yeah.
And then different songs, and then form over and over, and I can't remember some of the stuff that I'm reading. My own books. So I'm just saying, it's that power of rapping. So not like everybody can do whatever we just said, so don't worry about that. So check this out. Now I got there: basketball, football, track, tennis, golf. Y'all know we revolutionized the sports.
Yes.
Everything we do, they got to change the rules because of things we've done. That's KABAFA speaking. So when I say KABAFA popping,
Hey,
you
hey.
get a melanin popping, right? So KABAFA popping. Black woman in gymnastics. Y'all even know anything about that? Black woman in gymnastics. You know what I mean? I've got to run through this quick because I just added this, but I only mention this because they've changed the game. You know we haven't been in gymnastics over the years. Just for skinny white girls and just small. But now you got Dominique Dawes, you got Gabrielle Douglas, you got Simone Biles. Changed the game. Now they old school. Guess what? You got some new school performers. Now the thing about them is that Dominique Dawes was the 3-time Olympian. First black person to win an Olympic gold medal in gymnastics. First black woman to win an individual Olympic medal in arts, gymnastics. So she's not like the first black gymnast either. The point is the domination. Okay. Gabrielle Douglas, first black woman in history to become an individual all-around Olympic champion, only American all-around champion to win multiple gold medals in single Olympic games. Changed the game. She's still trying to get back in the game. And then you got Simone Biles. Oh my goodness, like 9-time U.S. champion. Simone Biles holds records for most gold medals won by a female gymnast in world championship history. That's that KABAFA work. I'm saying when we're given the chance to do something, you think about the Williams sisters in tennis. Change the game.
Yes.
Everything we do, we change the game. That's why you can't look at yourself as inferior. How can you be inferior if you change the game, everything there where you are supposed to be not be able to compete? So, last thing here, Black Girl Magic rocks U.S. Gymnastics Winter Cup 2022. 3.
Oh, look
Not
at
1,
you.
3. Out of all, 3 top. 1, 2, and 3. Connor McClain wins 2022 gymnastics championship. Again, sweep. 1, 2, who?
3.
That's why you're feared.
Yes.
Because everything you may touch, you didn't take to another level.
Yes.
And
Yes.
if you now take it to another level, may not be no other levels for everybody else. So you're attacked. Your KABAFA is squashed. They're trying to make sure that you don't have a chance to rise like that anymore. So energy. You can't keep taking on that negative energy. You got to find ways, and besides, at the forefront of doing this all the time, changing the game, how we're looking at, how we define things. So when we return to the source, I'm saying, as our brother Nobles and brother Akbar has presented information, help us return to the source, we start to study energy. Trauma and energy, reallocation. I mean, we don't deal with slavery, the slavery process. We don't deal with what happened. We need to reallocate that energy and channel it right. Positive thinking and channeling energy. I mean, we got so much negativity now and again. The pandemic has made it worse because people aren't working with others. Don't know how to communicate anymore. Don't know how to talk to each other. Energy is off. That's not us. It's beautiful to be back in a conference and talking to people. Not on Zoom. Detached. People sleeping on Zoom, they showing their videos. Like, there's no energy there. This is energy that we need to be channeling. So when we return to the source, just imagine these melanin recessive people coming to Africa and seeing these gigantic columns and monuments and temples. My goodness, they living in caves. Trying to find bloody pieces of meat to chop on. And you were what, building things? So to build that, you had to have been somewhere before you built that. Conceptualizing things, that is.
Yes.
So walking through the temples, you start to see the artistry and the work. My goodness, I mean, look at us today, we now using, I don't know, graphics and creating stuff. They were chiseling it. They were working it. You see the monuments, your whole mindset changes about what we did. You start looking at the temples, you start to see deep down in, going through a temple, I think it's Dandara, and you look, then you got to go through a 3 foot part just to get to that, where there's no light. So how did they even do that? No candles where to sit on the wall. So how did they even do that? So there's a light bulb there. The middle light bulb is like a little eel. Same thing you see with a light bulb today, the filament inside. Eels have what? Electricity. You see like a little piece down there, like a lotus bulb holding it. But they were symbolizing energy. They were mastering something that we can't master today. The Dajjal pillar sitting right there. So I'm saying that as you look at the temples, you see, we were studying something back there. On the temples, you see right here the picture of the Ankh. You see the picture of the Dajjal pillar, but you see his arms coming off of it. They were creative. Just like we are today when we start rapping about something. We say that was cool. That was fat. I mean, fat, like, the kids' TV say fat. That's the old word. I don't know what they're using today. But we got so many different ways to describe the same thing. But the way they have these ankhs and the Dajjal pillar, and they got the arms with the scepters next to it. I mean, they were, and who knows what's in that little cup below? Might be some kind of ionic formula that gives it energy. And here on the side there, I don't know what the heck this is, but look at that. 1, 2, 3, like some kind of capacitor that creates energy and generates power. So people think about the whole mirror, M-E-R, the pyramid, the complex, was created to what? Channel energy. That whole area. If you look at it, the Giza Plateau looks like the what? Orion belt in the sky. So they were on a whole nother level that we need to get back to. Let's just say by return to the source. And then think about the Ankh. The Ankh has been used as a symbol for life, but when you see many of the images, I think that segment and showing it's like a little, she's showing the Ankh right by the nose area. The pharaoh's actually holding an Ankh. And you see many images where the Ankh is put near the nose area where breath is taken in. So they understood something about that principle and how it was working. And I'm just saying today we may not know best how to use it because we haven't tapped into it. So melanin in nature. So melanin equals KABAFA. The actual process of transmitting or channeling energy is based on the electromagnetic nature of the body. You are nothing but electricity. You think about it, you're nothing but a vehicle for the soul to travel. Nothing but a vehicle for your soul to travel. So melanin is a natural semiconductor at room temperature. Melanin permits direct communication with nature. So from a scientific level, yes, you can study something called melanin. You can take a squid who can what? Release some ink. That's melanin. Take a moth, an animal, insects, they all got melanin, but what does that got to do with us? It has a lot to do with us because we got the same principles in our bodies.
Right.
So energy is out there. You only see visible light. We're talking, sitting right here, you see all this. Visible light is only like 300 to 700 nanometers. One little span. Guess what? Beyond all that, you got radio waves, microwaves, infrared rays. You also got your ultraviolet rays, X-rays, and you got your gamma rays. All that is out there. How does your body respond to that? If all you've seen is visual light, but your body responds to all that. You start to see why we get sick from being around too much electricity. Some people are electromagnetic hypersensitive, where that energy is causing a problem for the body. There's a brother named Leon Marshall, to give him a shout out, he wrote a book called The Hidden Signs of Melanin. He said my work helped him out in terms of him constructing things. He got a nice colored book out of England. I mean, he took it to another level. Much respect for this brother named Leonard Marshall, created a book called The Hidden Signs of Melanin. It talks about have you ever heard of chakras? Spiritual centers in our body that people are clairvoyant to see that energy coming from your body. Well, guess what? They correlate to certain endocrine glands, and they correlate to certain areas of the body that are governed. So sometimes if you have some, I don't know, some problems in your stomach, it may come out in your foot somewhere if you got an issue. So people who are experts at knowing the body can now channel this energy to what? Raise your consciousness. Versus being manipulated by just going to the doctor, here, take this pill. Come back and know how it makes you feel. So the science of energy. It is important to open the chakras and increase our energy flow. You know how many people have blocked chakras or blocked energy and they can't let go? They can't just be because they hold them back, don't want to be open. So in this society, we're told not to share your emotions, but emotions is nothing but energy coming out of you. That's what E means. Coming out of you. It's just motion coming out of you. So in that context, you need to look at ways to be let the energy flow to be healthier. That's why I'm saying it's so great to be back into a conference. With their swirling cone shapes, they kind of have like an auric field that comes out from the body, and there are things outside that can probably manipulate that negatively. But if we look at the seven layers of the body, real easy to think about. We got that in the science of melanin, but you got physical body, P, ether. You ever heard people have ether? It's like a certain ether around them, or aura. So physical body, ether, astral plane, mental plane, and spiritual planes. All those are around us. You can have your eyes closed and walk by somebody, and you feel a certain energy. I don't know. I don't know how blind people function and operate, but they have another sense. They also hear better. So your senses are being heightened if something else is not working as well.
Sorry, what's the A?
A is astral plane. A-S-T-R-A-L.
Thank you.
Astral. Wrapping this up, melanin research. Again, people are studying this. Italians, Australians, taking it to the laboratory, making a $1 billion industry. The dark brown melanin pigment, which we call melanin, is now being applied to conduct electricity. Now, we've been talking this for years.
Yeah.
But they've taken it to that level to now manipulate it in the laboratory. So you look at look at frontiers in science. It talks about how melanin, they can put it in a vacuum and make it 1 billion times more quicker in terms of how it makes semiconductor work, semiconductor elements work. So moving on to talk about where we're at in this world, this Wi-Fi, you know, all the people talked about all the problems that have happened in the world. Whenever you had these big pandemics, it's always because of big changes in technology that came out. Radar, to back in the time to telegraph, to now moving up to this 5G. Wi-Fi studies have shown that it alters your calcium channels.
Wow.
Calcium channels are important for both your heart and your brain. You know how people had heart attacks recently? Or just died suddenly, recently? All this energy that's going on, being circulated even in your house with the smart meters on your house, shouldn't be near your bedroom. With the Wi-Fi router, shouldn't be near your bedroom. You shouldn't even have it on at nighttime if it's that close to you. But all this energy around is problematic. And again, studies have shown that those electromagnetic fields are impacting the body. Voltage gated channels. Again, that affects both your heart and your brain. It says right here, 2.5 gigahertz radio frequency. And sometimes, I used to have a cordless phone. They said the cordless phones have more radiation than the darn cell phones. So it alters gene expression in human cultured cells. I mean, the studies are there, but you know the cell phone industry and people are not going to talk about this.
Right.
It says, we observed that 221 genes alter their expression after 2-hour exposure. The number of affected genes increased to 759 after 6-hour exposure. We don't know what's happened to us, all this energy is being emitted around us. It's also taking us away from the natural energy that we should be tapping into, which is problematic. And so it says functional classification of the affected genes reveals that apoptosis related genes, that's apoptosis means cell death. Cell death genes were among the up-regulated ones, and the cell cycle genes were among the down-regulated ones. It's altering our gene expression. We have to be careful and wary about the environment we're living in. And that's why when we were away for the pandemic, all this stuff went up in your neighborhoods. It's 5G towers. What was your question?
Would you say that our young folks who spend a lot of time in this and things that we see going on with them is a correlation of some sort?
Oh yeah, if you look at the studies, it shows that kids who are pretty much connected to these tablets and things at a very young age, brain cells have been impacted. I mean, that studies show the so-called thickness of the cortical layer and all that. People are studying this. People don't care. It's easy to push the button now and get an answer. I mean, there's power in the computer. Without a question, it's how we use it. But yes, the children today, and I'm saying the kids, I think it's impacting in the classroom.
Yeah.
You can't read and write anymore. You can't read, write, spell anymore. You can't read, write, spell, or communicate anymore. So who do you hire? We're in trouble. So the technology has been problematic, even though we can push a button and get an answer. Because all those towers, there's one right here, that's down the street from where I work. One right there, one right there. They had to put them close because it makes the orientation better for you to work your smart car. Or your smart home.
car.
Yeah, I mean, with self-drive cars in your home, you got smart homes. So all that is made condensed in terms of the radars, because the more they have, the quicker things are. So conclusion, can we rename this melanin called KABAFA? Can we redefine the science? It's up to us. I mean, we can't wait on white people or melanin recessive people to dictate to us about the science. You got people taking blood pressure medicines that they should be taking. They may work for white people, not for black people. That's real. So people are dying from taking blood pressures you've been marketing for white people. Can we master ancient technology? That's the tough part, because you got to go back to study it first. I mean, so many books have been probably destroyed, so we don't know what really happened. Don't know the connections. We can't look at it like Kemet was the only place. There were other parts of the Earth that we had channeled the energy, and maybe that's what they were doing in those places, channeling the energy. You don't make a gigantic place like Stonehenge in the middle there in England and just put it there for nothing. Because you're working on cyclical time, not linear time. You're working on the cosmos and how it operates, studying nature. So everywhere you see where we built gigantic monuments that are still standing, I don't know how long this Pontchartrain is going to last, but people are already complaining about the building and all that. But these buildings fail. Those monuments are still standing because they're without cyclical time. Can we reverse psychological trauma? I wanted to really talk about this one part here. Can we enhance the overall human experience? So that's for us as black psychologists to talk about. I got this book here called The Indivisible History of the Human Race. It's written by Christine Keneally. I'm reading this because it says our DNA and history, they shape our identities and our future. It talks about this brother in Benin who had to leave Benin and went to Canada, but he connected with a white guy who was studying economics because they wanted to look at, is it economics that the poor countries in Africa, they're poor because they're just poor, or is it something that created that? So they're asking that kind of question. Building on Nunn's finding that the countries that lost more of their populations to the slave trade over 100 years ago were also the poorest today. So we can ask that question because it makes sense. You lose the people, you lose the population, therefore you stay poor. Nunn and Wanchikin, so Nunn's the Korean guy, Wanchikin's the brother from Benin. They come together and start studying this. Examine the Afrobarometer, a survey project that measures public attitudes of different aspects of African daily life, like democracy, employment, and the future of citizenship, is comparable to the Gallup poll. The researchers found that overall, people tended to have more trust in those who were closer to them, for example, friends over government officials. This was a universal pattern. Check this out. But it was also the case that the groups that were most exposed to the slave trade over 100 years ago were also the groups with the lowest levels of trust today. Repeat that again. The case that the groups that were the most exposed to the slave trade over hundreds of years ago were also the groups with the lowest levels of trust today. They don't trust one another anymore. Your family sold me, your people sold me. They don't trust one another today. Most modern Africans whose ancestors lost the most people to slavers distrusted not just their local government and other members of their ethnicity, but also relatives and neighbors much more than Africans whose ancestors were not as exposed to the slave trade. Genetically, epigenetics, trauma, passed on, and you then see why we don't trust one another. That goes deep when we start talking about just psychology and what we need to talk about with trauma and dealing with it. Sister Drills here used to create what the emancipation circles. You know, we need to take it to the level of understanding why we as a people don't study the slave trade, therefore don't understand the connections of why we are still backwards today. Did the slave trade give rise to a culture of mistrust that was passed down from the slave era, even to individuals who live in the same places today? There are good reasons to believe that it might have. For those who witnessed the ways an innocent bystander might be swept up by or somehow betrayed into the slave trade, it would have made more sense to distrust people as a general rule. People who automatically distrusted others were probably more likely to do well, or at least to not be enslaved. Wariness would also have been a smart strategy to teach the next generation. That's deep.
That is.
We're talking about epigenetics. So when we speak of this term, I'm trying to say KABAFA, this energy that's been kind of swallowed up and welled up and not released right.
Right.
We as psychologists need to take it to that level. That's what I'm saying, that KABAFA, in my opinion, is a better way of explaining our connection to energy rather than just saying melanin. Because melanin has all those different aspects to talk to you about, but we can now channel those aspects to how we can change the world again. Thank you. Questions?
Just your last point.
Yes.
It's kind of curious that those who were made slaves are so trusting of the enslavers.
Yeah.
If in fact the residue of having been enslaved is a manifestation of distrust among those people who were victims of the slavery. So that seems kind of paradoxical that those who are the descendants of slavery are so trusting of their slavers.
Right.
And generations later, they still trust them so much.
And one of the most powerful experiences I've had is when I traveled to Ghana with Brother Akbar and with Nobles, and we went and visited the camp, the Pico slave camp. And we went inland. It's not on the coast. Inland, where people would take. So the question we asked about, well, who are those people who sold us? Or who are those people? They say we've dealt with them. You know what I mean? They dealt with those who were the complicitors, the one who were involved in this slavery. So, okay, we heard that. But it's as powerful as to be around and experience, to hear them express their struggles about dealing with this. Because they like, yo, brother and sister, thank you for coming home. That's how they felt. On the coastline, they didn't feel like that. And the crowd's like, they're looking at Beyonce, is that Ice Cube? Is that, who's that? So they're looking at us like movie stars and people to be looked at as objects versus going inland where there's a different connection. And even as we then went there and we sat at the punishment rock, they called it the punishment rock. And again, with Nobles, you're there to say, you need to change the name. It's not a punishment rock. That was on the slave camp where they said the people who were bad kept running away, hit them on the punishment rock. No, called the resistance rock. So as we change the names of things, guess what? We change the dynamics of how people view things. But yes, the whole issue of the Africanity issue of slavery, we don't talk about it. You got some people there in Ghana that still don't go to the slave camps because they don't want to deal with that stuff. You got black people right now today don't want to talk about slavery. So we don't talk about those origins of this problem. So, yes.
And recently I was just in South Africa, and I went also to the Kingdom of Lesotho, and the Lesotho people, they were talking, because I'm always like, y'all didn't come get me, you know, doing all that stuff. And they're like, excuse me. They said, no, there were some people that died on the beaches trying to come and save. So that's an aspect I've never thought about. And now you've added another thing about it would have been better to distrust and trust. So does that go against all of the, because I'm still on this journey understanding all the African things about myself, and how we are the Myers, optimal side. We are the humanists. We're more human than everybody. But did our humanists get us in this trouble, and would it have been better not to be?
No. A silly, the negative energy that Ani talks about with Yoruba. That's a negative energy we don't want to deal with. As I said, we were like this before we were discovered. When we got discovered, now we're dealing with all this stuff. But psychologically is where we need to look at how do we now tap into that. I'm saying psychologically because there's some cultures and some places where people aren't even addressing these issues. I spent time in Brazil. They never heard of the Middle Passage. They don't deal with that. Many of them came from the Angola area or actually Benin and there. So not from up top West Coast. So they came from a certain area. There's a connection. That's why Angola and in that area, Mozambique, they got a connection. But they don't understand the ship, the ride. They don't understand the processing. So when I was there last month, oh my goodness, I took a ferry ride. I got sick. I was ready to jump ship. I wouldn't have been a good slave. I can't sit here and do this. I would have jumped ship. Shark, whatever, I'm out of here. That's a mentality. If you don't experience it, you don't know. So the South Africa experience, totally different perspective. Up north, east, so depending upon where you were with the process, is pretty much how you'd be able to stand firm today. But the other deep thing about this is that the places who were most decimated, those who've been to Africa, the places who were most decimated were the most organized. You see all these paradoxical things. The places that were most decimated in terms of Ghana, Mali, Senegal, all this way, they were most organized. So the organization made it easy for the European to come in and manipulate and shake over and change. The ones that were not organized, rebellious. Okay, come on ahead. All right.
We got something for
You
you.
know what I mean? So the mentality is different. Just asking a question.
First of all, I want to thank you very much for the presentation. And I think the part that I enjoyed the most was the part that we talked about energy, because I truly believe that it has to be a real strong focus on healing.
Yes.
Because if not, we're going to lose our children. We're going to lose a generation. And when you talked about the chakras, which in ancient, our ancestors called the Ubuntu system, the same system. So it's a universal system. It's been here. They had it. They knew how if something occurred to you, they didn't use the word trauma. They used another word, myopia, it's chaos.
Okay.
And so I think we have to stop mixing systems and words and focus on healing and knowing what that healing means for a generation. Otherwise, we're going to keep going down that dark hole. We have 114 energy centers, not just 7.
Right.
And out of those 114 energy centers, we're given the power that anything that comes to us, we get even cancer. And so it's important that we know that we don't have to be sick. The epigenetics says that 90% of our illness is environmental, it's not genetic. So if we know all of this, how can we translate it into a strong healing paradigm as opposed to one that leaves people clinically depressed, passively depressed, actively depressed? I mean, I've evaluated thousands of children in my lifetime. I know the DSM by heart. And each time I leave, I feel like a traitor because there's so many diseases that we label people with that we know are clearly environmental.
Yeah. So if you all allow me to write the book on KABAFA, I will deal with the issue of this energy and information.
Please write.
Because all our cells, again, our body is nothing but a vehicle for the soul to travel. So if we look at the vehicle, the body, you don't treat the vehicle right, it's not going to run right.
Right.
But all those energy centers you just said that people don't tap into explains why all this energy is impacting us. All this external stuff, all these TVs and the radiation, is it closing up those fields? You know, so energy and information. So when I say energy, tap into it. Information, cut yourself in your brain, Alzheimer's. Everything is now associated with being inflamed. What now deals with that? The immune, I don't say immune system. The system to fight those foreign agents. I don't say immune because it's not immune to anything. You got a defense mechanism system. So when you start processing energy and information on cells, you start dealing with healing. I didn't have that as one of the reasons for melanin, but the fourth one should have been cellular regeneration. You get yourself cut, man. I got so many marks in my body last 2 years, and not there anymore. That melanin just healed it. So we focus on healing, you're right, much better off than dealing with trauma. Yes.
Dr. Moore, outstanding presentation. Can you go back to the slide showing J?
Yeah, in Africa?
Yeah. Because you talked about the Italian researchers studying melanin. But I've also seen that some research was suggesting that the consciousness itself is in the cerebral spinal fluid. So when I'm looking at these glyphs, this metametric, I'm seeing the vertebrae and seeing the jet and then seeing the Ankh as the life symbol. And maybe this is an expression of consciousness is life, life is in the vertebrae, travels through the cerebral.
Okay, and I would say the chemicals going through the fluid is what the life is. Because all those chemicals that's talked about that are carbon-based molecules, those chemicals are then what's seeped into that fluid. If you think about even when you're meditating, you're chanting, wherever else you use the chant, you're vibrating. Your ventricles are like cavities. You're stimulating those chemicals to be released. That's why you're feeling much better. when you're chanting and you're going through that state. So I would say the chemicals within that fluid is what then creates that consciousness.
So then in that, the movement of the spine
Okay.
would allow for better movement of those chemicals in the fluid.
That's why people do Kundalini.
Yep.
Exactly.
Properly sit to meditate.
Exactly.
The spine has to be in a
Yes.
certain position.
Yes.
So
And
then, if that's the case, the applied nature of this would be, we gotta stop sedentary lifestyles.
Definitely.
That's why we got more sick during the pandemic. And the problems that are occurring after this. Again, the heart attacks, the dying suddenly, all these things was a stationary life, without a question.
yes.
You know?
Yes.
Tony, you had a question? Yes.
Well, brother, you mentioned hip hop, so once again, another nice presentation.
Thank you.
You know, I've wondered and we're challenged with, you brought up the concept of trust, you know. And so, a couple of things we're grappling with, are questions of what does, the lack of trust actually mean at an energetic level. When you talk about this, you know, not trusting as a survival mechanism, one of the things I wonder out loud is how does that translate to impacting our code, our actual DNA?
Yeah, I would just say, real simple, the answer to that is blockage. If I can't, y'all are in here, anybody a spy? Yes? Who you spy with? Who you with? CIA? No. FBI? So if I'm in an environment where I can't trust, I can't deliver. So it blocks. So the blockage is a problem with us as a community. We should be able to be free. Fred Hampton trusted everybody. Came in his own home and shot him up, trusted everybody. So in a situation where that trusting is important, but we're so trusting that we sold our relatives across the way, not knowing where they were going. So true. So I'm just saying, we're dealing with a beast. Like I said, you missed that part, I think, about the vertical disease. You saw that part? So if we don't deal with that, the vertical disease, that will keep happening. We never will trust one another. So it's a Native American term, but I'm just saying that it gets to the point of what we're fighting against. So it's a cannibalistic, psycho-spiritual virus. So we're sometimes acting like them in the worst way. So I'm saying for us as a people, by us not studying our own history and our own legacy, we then are blocked on that level. And then when we can't just be free to what it means to be a human, that's why the native peoples of the lands are being exploited all over. In the Amazon, white folks trying to tear the Amazon up. You got a new president coming in trying to reverse all that, but you got some people today that still have not been touched and reached on this planet. That's beautiful. Guess what? They still throwing spears. You come in here, you're gonna die. You heard the stories about some anthropologists going to some community. Hey, how you doing? Neck cut. Don't come here, because you're bringing your diseases, you're bringing your filth, you're bringing your psycho-spiritual diseases. We didn't think like that. We're so loving. Y'all know we take anybody in our homes. Y'all know it's like that. That's part of our history and our culture and our heritage. Someone has exploited that.
Yes.
So yes, blockage, I'm saying, it's nice to be able to do that when you're amongst people who you trust.
Right.
But I think we have so much blockage, and really, right now, I mean, who do we count on? I mean, we saw we had a black president. Guess what? He killed an African leader.
Oops, ouch, ouch.
We had a black president. He killed an African leader who was trying to organize the United States of Africa. You heard of that before?
Ouch.
Coming from what Ghana
Ouch.
also started. The CIA took him out. I mean, who do we trust? That's why personally for me, Ryan Coogler and the Black Panther, get the CIA out. You already putting the message in there like they're going to be in there all the time. They ain't got to be in there. And then the last one when they had the Mayans and the black people fighting one another, why are you even talking that? So it blocks us, in my opinion, about how we relate to one another and trust one another when you got this other element, the vertical disease coming in, where people have a certain mindset that they want to rape, pillage, and take, because that's the mentality. That's not African people. That's not an African way.
So then the last thing I'll say is on this issue of the cerebral spinal fluid, waters of none, and the vibratory capacity, it really is universal. It goes beyond our extended universe. So one of the things that we're taught is that we have knowing and knowing experiences, and that we radiate and vibrate across 3 different dimensions and 7 directions all at the same time. That vibration has to account for amoroso
Absolutely.
for being able to tap into this universal energy. But we're not well acquainted with it, at least not on purpose.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, yeah, thank you for being here to really enhance, put the nail in the coffin on that one. Yes.
I thank you for your presentation. And yes, you're on to much with KABAFA, that this concept. You know, my writing, KABAFA, Building a Lighted Temple, I had 20 years ago. And really, that spirit matter continuum, moving ka, spirit, taking up the substance of itself, moving to be the physicalizing form of ka, physicalizes in form, and how to move back into spirit, from the spirit matter continuum, how to move from that spiritual into the material and back into the spiritual. And so it is the fire element. It is moving that kunda, that sha, that ra, that chekam, that power in the base chakra, the fire within. And so you're talking about this, the bringing, the fire atom. So it's and in the second book I write, Merkaba, it's how we're moving from being having this linear consciousness, Ka-ba, spirit matter, into being spherical beings, moving back again, keeping it fluid. This Algonquin concept is just a stuckness, whereas being too out, where we would just open everywhere with everything is a kind of other direction. So it's how do we keep having the fluidity, the adaptation.
My opinion, we have to eliminate some of these external factors that are causing the problem.
Mm-hmm.
We have too much external energy coming in rather than channeling where inside.
Inside.
A lot of people
It's in.
watching TV is telling you a vision. You
Yes.
keep on doing that, you keep on having this external information. The radio, I can't personally tolerate commercial radio anymore. It's like, because all the commercials, it's putting something in your head.
Yeah.
Independent ways of kind of operating, tuning out, makes you what? Tune in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the first step, cutting out, I think, some of these external elements. Because as you travel the world and talk to other people, oh my goodness, they don't have the same problems we have.
Right.
They never heard of some of the issues and things we're talking about. They never heard of the Santos. Some people never heard of Venus and Serena Williams. Stuff we think are like common here, it's not even part of reality. So I'm just saying, if we cut out some things that are, in my opinion, draining us, I think
Yes.
we have a better chance of reaching where we should be.
Yes.
Yes.
So with the connection, I think I have that spirit of not trusting. You talked about the 5G, and I was just watching how we're progressing with this intelligence. Now we're talking AI.
Yeah.
And you're thinking of our kids. There's got to be some type of connection for some powers to be, because of how it happened. 5G happened, showed up while we were locked in. I didn't stay in, I was out, and I seen a lot of things going around. They were doing a lot of building, there was a lot of stuff going around. We were supposed to be sheltered in place, and the people that didn't look like me were out doing things.
Wow.
What do you think the effects of the time frame, the timeline, the framework
It's
of
perfect.
that, this, and now AI?
It's perfect. Massive reset.
That makes sense.
All this is about people controlling things. Artificial intelligence is going to do damage to us. Because the whole issue of recognition, facial recognition, and then even if you plug in names, someone has to do that first. Someone's inputting that first. That's the man with the Wetiko disease creating that. So if
Right.
you look at black images or look at negative images, then those artificial intelligence operations are focused on not your enhancement, but for them to continue control. They got
Right.
robotic dogs now. So the robotic
Yes.
dogs, they see a black man, they see a bald head, attack first.
Right.
So people set that stuff up. So artificial intelligence is problematic. People talking about the robots now that can now think for themselves. So the melanin recessive man has created an environment where they're now in a position where stuff is out of control.
Right.
So artificial intelligence is going to be a real problem for us as a people, especially since we don't control it. Again, if y'all go to the bathroom sometime and y'all might wonder why the water don't work, it's because it's not set up for your melanin.
Yeah, exactly, exactly,
Siri doesn't
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
That could be. But I'm just talking about the issue of blackness, not so much voice, but the voice could be an issue also. When people were going through the pandemic, they had something called pulsometers that would measure your oxygen levels. Guess what? They didn't work right for black people. So that means your oxygen levels are being measured. Oh, nothing wrong with you. You go home and you die. So the technology is problematic. So we have to look at artificial intelligence, in my opinion, as a way it's been used to control us. But that's what all this 5G stuff is about. To control these mechanisms, you don't need people anymore. We're in trouble. You go to the supermarket, you don't need nobody there. You gotta go to it on a computer. You just pushing buttons trying to get out of there. You go to the bank, they don't want to see you. You're not going to do it online. There's no more people anymore. So this artificial intelligence created, in my opinion, a disconnect with what needs to be human people, or having the spiritual elements of enhancement. So you raised that's a whole other discussion. That's a whole other discussion. Yes.
Just some quick comments. I've been wondering about this notion of trust, and it sounds like when it got positioned in the room, it was like static, which seems very Western or white as a system, opposed to more fluid and African. So I'm thinking of my great-grandmother who lived long enough for me to see her, and my college roommate, Muyo Aterabu. They both had this thinking of, you trust, but you keep watching.
That's important. Yeah, that's
right.
The wariness.
And I learned that from him, you know, you trust, but you keep your eye on it.
Pray and watch.
Or as my grandmother, if you spent the night and you weren't used to being in her house, she would put you in the room where the floor squeaked. So that you got up and got this to the door. You didn't know that. I knew that. That she put you in that room so she could hear you getting up. So you trust, but you still keep your eye on it. As a very African way of knowing. And then this notion that Brother brought up back here of when you ask that question, can we reverse trauma? We know that the same way things get in, we can get them out.
Yes.
But we don't offer it. We offer this notion when you said, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to talk about it. So you think of neuroscience and our limbic system, that the limbic system is designed for us to, you know, we in the streets we say, oh, she's just in her feelings. What that really means is she's retelling her story and she hasn't said, that made me feel scared, that made me feel anxious. So when we say we don't talk about it anymore, we stick ourselves into this other place that won't reverse it, because our healing is attached to not just talking about it, but moving while we're talking about it. They're actually synonymous as the very African way of us healing ourselves, that we've surrendered in a notion to be, you call them less melanated, I just like saying this white system that kind of governs our globe, unfortunately, in this spiritual diseased way, that if we can get closer to those other ways that I believe are inherently part of our healing, not the only way, but our healing is attached to that. We don't talk about it and we don't do it because it's not demonstrated.
All of your times, and so you guys, the next presentation coming in.
Oh, okay. And did you sign?
Coming next
Yes,
presentation.
Did everybody sign?
I did.
This side of the room didn't. 'Cause she was just-
I came late, a lot of